Thank you. It's not an easy name to pronounce, I'm sure. And thank you for the opportunity to coming to this wonderful conference and talking about one very big but very interesting idea of how to deeply decarbonize our economy. The Bellona Foundation has been working for 30 years, and for over 2 decades we've had offices in Brussels and in Russia. And our work in energy and climate gas mitigation goes several ways. It's obvious to us that not only one single solution will solve this question, it's the wide array of solutions available to us that will. But renewable energy and sufficient amounts of sustainable renewable energy is key if we are to decarbonize our future and, of course, save the Arctic. And the rationale for clean energy in the Arctic is obvious. The Arctic is suffering more than many other places in the world in terms of climate change. We see that all the time. And I'm glad to see that in this conference, many discussions have been made on how to decarbonize and how to go alternative ways in the energy systems of the Arctic. Oil and gas has been discussed as an opportunity for sustainable jobs, or for at least long-term jobs, in the Arctic as well. And many of the discussions here have been flowing around the possibility of distributed energy systems, small-scale microgrids and solutions off-grid. That is very important. That's another key thing that we need to solve. But the story I'm telling today is about how to tap the vast potential of renewable energy production in the North Atlantic, not only for our solutions here in Iceland and Norway and other countries, but actually to also facilitate a green change in Europe at large. Because the potential for renewables in this area of the world, in the North Atlantic Arctic, is enormous. And we know that already the energy systems of Iceland and Norway and Greenland and others are very dependent and are heavily induced by renewable technologies. 98% of the energy system in Norway, electricity system in Norway, is renewables. And the numbers are much the same for many other energy systems as well. But there is a vast potential to actually facilitate a green shift by interconnecting these systems. And today we know that's technically feasible. So then the question is it desirable? Can we find the business models to make that happen? Because change, we must. The drivers for renewable energy systems in the Arctic are obvious to many of us. It's driven by necessity and by opportunity. This wonderful, colorful graph on your right-hand side are all the scenarios from the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. And if we are to reach the 2-degree target, we need to go at the bottom. We need to go below zero, we need to go carbon negative by the second half of this century. We cannot do that without renewables, not exclusively, but we need to. If you are to reach the 1.5-degree scenario, we really need to step it up, and that is a big challenge. And it's vital for saving the Arctic. But there's also opportunity. Building new sustainable jobs, new industries in this area by tapping the potential of renewables to produce high-energy products like aluminium, or new jobs like green data centers, for instance, is one solution. Producing hydrogen with stranded power is another for export, and decarbonizing the transport system. All these things aren't just necessary solutions to reach the 2-degree target, they're also business opportunities that we need to look at. But the introduction of large-scale new renewable and variable renewable energy is a challenge as well, and it has challenged the global markets and the EU market significantly. Variable renewables have damaged the business model of traditional utilities in Europe, and at the same time, these traditional utilities providing balancing power for days when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow is really necessary. And a big discussion on capacity markets and how to actually do this has been facilitated. But what we know is we need to decarbonize the economy. And carbon capture storage is one solution, but finding a way to balancing this power is key. The reason why Denmark can go absolutely 100% renewable, even on days that they don't have 100% wind power production, is because of import of clean energy from Norway. Interconnectivity. And connecting these standalone energy grids is an opportunity that the North Atlantic Energy Network project has looked at. They have looked at the possibility of how to connect these systems for a large-scale energy grid that combines Greenland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Shetland, Norway, and in the end also Scotland, the UK, and the rest of Europe. And that's a fascinating thought. But there are, of course, barriers and challenges to this as well. And each of these economies and energy systems have their own challenges to tackle. Greenland, so far, is difficult to connect technically for the next 5 or 10 years. But down the line, it's an opportunity. The infrastructure there isn't heavily developed as well. But Greenland has the opportunity to do what Norway and Iceland has done in the past and build up its own high-energy industry by using hydropower, and in the end, building up an infrastructure that facilitates a possibility for exporting power as well in the future. Iceland and Norway, two good examples of countries and energy systems that have a large amount of renewables and have used that for aluminium industry and other ways to export their surplus energy into the world. And the potential in both countries is still vast for developing renewables even further. So is the case for the Faroe Islands and Shetland and others. The potential alone for wind power offshore is enormous. And then, of course, there's the possibility of connecting that to the rest of the European energy market. And it's our clear message that we need to look at this opportunity as a potential for international cooperation and also looking at other opportunities that can facilitate robust business models for this. Because there are, of course, challenges and there are barriers. The cost alone for these systems are enormous, and I'm sure we'll go into depth with that when we go into the breakout sessions later today. But finding business models for single energy systems is very hard. The Faroe Islands alone can't shoulder the cost of such a cable. But connecting that to the opportunity of connecting Iceland to Scotland creates another business model altogether. Interconnection and integration of market is also a large challenge, of course. The European market isn't integrated at all. They have different price areas, and they have challenges with that. And the European Commission is also trying to tackle that with a 2030 target of 15% interconnection. Linking that to the possibility of supplying large-scale renewable power from the North Atlantic could be an opportunity to go completely renewable for at least parts of the European energy sector. And political barriers, of course, exist as well. We need to find international cooperation models to actually make this work, and popular support. Not in my backyard questions will arise. Will it be acceptable for people to have a higher cost of energy to get these interconnections in place? Will it be acceptable to have large-scale construction of new renewable projects offshore or inland? We need to tackle all these questions as well. But the opportunities and the synergies are definitely there. If we look at all these projects combined, then we will probably come much nearer to a solution and facilitate a positive discussion on how policies can change. Also, these integrations with different areas will create the opportunity to facilitate large-scale exploitation of renewable resources. I mentioned the Faroe Islands. They have got an enormous potential for offshore wind, but finding the business model for that without interconnection is nigh impossible. Offshore electrification is another opportunity that could provide the business model needed. The offshore part of the Norwegian economy alone emits over a third of the climate gases from Norway. and that needs to be decarbonized. That's the case for the sector in the UK as well. And combining these large-scale transport cables of electricity with offshore electrification could provide the final key to finding a business model that works. And again, back to Europe. Future integration of the North European energy market into the European with large-scale renewables could facilitate the function of the North Atlantic being a green battery for variable renewables in the European Union. Like Norway is for Denmark now, and like Norway will be for other energy markets as well, that opportunity could also be provided to Iceland and to other areas. And reaching the 2030 targets for Europe, doing that requires us to think of all the possible solutions we have at our hand. And discussing these items further, like we will this afternoon, and hopefully in the years to come, might even facilitate a positive discussion on how to create the future we need. There are many ifs and buts, but as Alan Kay wonderfully says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And these solutions, together with the others, is not only important for enabling influx of new renewables in these economies we're discussing here. More importantly, this can facilitate this can facilitate us to help Europe save the Arctic by decarbonizing their energy systems. Thank you very much.